The Loch Doon Aerial Gunnery School was a project developed between 1916 and 1918 and was then abandoned. Loch Doon lies quite close to Dalmellington in East Ayrshire. The loch itself was raised by 6 feet with the construction of a dam and a hydroelectric plant to supply power to the project. Also, a new airfield had been constructed at Bogton, which is close to the Ayr Road in Dalmellington. In addition, there was a standard gauge railway branching off from the Dalmellington branch line, running for about 2.2 kilometres or 1.4 miles, and terminated close to Craig and Gillen House. The project had been initiated by Colonel Branca, who had visited a successful aerial gunnery school in France. At this stage, aircraft had mainly been used for observation purposes, and their use as actual weapons was only beginning. The project was given a high priority and the search began for a suitable site. What was required was something that was isolated, with a large surface area of water and gently sloping banks where aerial targets could be placed on zigzag monorails. Despite the protestations of the local farmers and of those who knew the area, the Royal Flying Corps chose Loch Doon. Some of the problems with the extreme boggy nature of the surrounding ground, and also in dry weather, in drought, small islands would appear on the loch that would obstruct seaplanes. The project progressed rapidly with the construction of accommodation for 1,200 German prisoners of war who would work on the project, as well as 1,500 McAlpine engineers and workers, and 500 members of the armed forces, including army engineers. The road access quickly became almost unusable, and a railway was built as far as Dalfarson, which still lies roughly 1 kilometre away from the loch itself, so everything had to be taken from that site up to the loch by road. Several harbours were constructed, also hangars with central heating. There was a cinema for 400 people, a hospital, there were sewage systems, and also a water supply. The first major problem was the Loch Doon Airfield beside the loch. This had various concrete access roads constructed. There were hangars built there. There were store buildings and accommodation. They were also said to have laid 65 miles of drainage pipes, which can still be seen from aerial photographs. They also put a great deal of soil on the surface of the airfield, all to no avail, and it proved to be totally useless. They were forced to build a second airfield down at Bogton, which lies very close to Dalmellington. Here a similar amount of drainage was constructed. Drainage pipes ran into the muck water, and the remains of these can still be seen. There are also strange hexagonal structures in the middle of the airfield. Down here they built stores, accommodation for vehicles, hangars, and so on, and the railway ran beside it, and old photographs show that various sidings. A monorail was built on the east side of the loch. The concrete blocks on which this stood can still be seen when the water is low. There was also a narrow gauge railway system. The zigzag target lines that ran down the side of the loch were abandoned very early on. In fact, the targets were never delivered. It turned out that the speed at which they could travel, about 25–30 miles an hour, was far too slow to replicate what would happen in the air. The local farmers had been turned off their land, but their predictions proved to be true. The weather was totally unsuitable for flights at the gunnery school, sometimes for days or even weeks on end. The only airfield successfully constructed was the one at Bogton near Dalmellington, but this proved to be too far away for any plane on the loch that got into trouble. The headquarters of the gunnery school was at Camlarg House, now demolished in Dalmellington. At the same time as the project was developing, there was a rapid improvement in airplane design, speed and handling abilities. This greatly affected the constructions that had already taken place on the loch, which had become redundant. The final nail in the coffin for the project was the suggestion that a railway tunnel should be excavated which would run roughly 1,200 feet or 350 metres from Dalfarson up to the loch side. When the cost of this was appreciated, and the cost of the total project so far taken into consideration, it was decided to abandon the entire project. By this time it had cost in modern terms around £100 million. Very quickly most above ground structures were removed, much of which were bulldozed straight into the loch. In 1935 the loch was raised by a further 25 feet or so, and much of the other remnants are hidden under the water.